Evening, everyone. It's your girl, Marcy Thomas, back with you for another episode of Live Well Sisters. So everybody come on in the room, as we love to say over here, and get ready for a great conversation that I am really excited about, not only because I just really loved and devoured this book. The young lady who's coming to speak to us is a friend of mine. This is like our third time actually doing an interview. We've met in person and broke bread and all these wonderful things. So I just really consider it an honor to have her here and to be able to introduce to some of you and reintroduce to others this wonderful, wonderful, great author. So I am coming to you normally from the outskirts of Atlanta, but I'm actually in Southern Georgia this week hanging out with my mom. So if you're here regularly and things look a little bit different, that's why. But I was dedicated to making sure that we had this great conversation. So tonight, I am excited to talk about Bibliotherapy in the Bronx by my girl, Emely Rumble. Now, she is a licensed clinical social worker, school social worker, and bibliotherapist with over 15 years of experience supporting children, families, and communities through storytelling, mental health advocacy, and trauma-informed care. She is the author of this wonderful debut novel of hers that blends some of her life story, clinical insight, as well as cultural commentary on how literature can be used as a healing tool, especially within our communities. And this is really important here because, of course, we're always talking about books, and this is coming up on the end of Mental Health Awareness Month. So it's a perfect time for us to have this conversation. Now, her voice and work have been featured in Essence, CNN Health, Bustle Wellness, Therapy for Black Girls, Success Magazine, and so many other places. And so I could go on and on and on about my friend, the wonderful M, but I want to go ahead and bring her on up. So without any further delay, let's welcome Emely Rumble to Live Well Sister. Again, welcome, Emely. Hey! We outside, yes. So of course, mine is an advanced copy. You see, got my little tabs in here and stuff like that.
I love it.
So first of all, just congratulations. You know, I know we've known each other for a few years now, and I know that this has been a journey for you. So how does it feel to actually finally have this work out in the world?
Man, it's a full circle moment. It's definitely it's surreal to like grind so hard towards something for so many years and then to be in that moment, you know, because life doesn't stop just because you publish the book. Still got to go to work, still got to take care of the kids. So I find myself, you know, just looking for those quiet moments to just sit with the moment and not let it pass me by, because it's so easy to just get caught up in the hustle and bustle. You wrote the book, now you got to market the book, now you got to, you know, tour the book or make appearances for the book. And so I'm just in a state now of being present and really trying to savor this time, because the book will be a month old tomorrow.
Actually. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, it published on April 29th, and tomorrow will be 30 days. I can't believe it.
Wow. So 30-day baby. Your baby's 30 days old. I love that. But I say year old, so it really is kind of because you've been working on it for a while. So it's new to us, but it's not new to you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It probably took about 10 years Someone had asked me it recently, when did I start writing it? And I don't think I ever set out to write Bibliotherapy in the Bronx. I think it's a practice of my writing. So being a therapist who is also an avid reader and also an avid writer, I write a lot, sometimes just to process things, sometimes, for clients, with clients. We do a lot of expressive creative arts therapy and expressive writing. And so that's part of my personal practice, is always to reflect through writing and reading. And so I think this book is a culmination of really 10 years of practice using this modality. And I'm just so grateful. It's really a beautiful thing to have clients also read their case studies. And,
Yes.
it's a very special thing for them to see how connected other people feel to their stories. Of course, their names are changed, but I think
Right.
that's beautiful too, to offer that to my clients who said yes to being a part of the book, that like, your story, it took you so long to own it
Mhm.
in therapy, but you did, and we wrote it down, and other people are healing because you shared. And that's a really beautiful feeling too.
Yes, and that's what I love so much about this book. We talked for a few minutes before we came on, but there were points in the book I was like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna cry. Number one, because I'm just so proud of and happy for you, but also just thinking about my own experiences with books and libraries and poetry and all of the different things that you talk about in the book. So, what was it, or when was it, that you really fell in love with reading?
Oh man, I've been reading since I was 3 years old.
Wow.
I think so much of it too was being the daughter of teen parents. I was raised by my maternal grandmother. And so, she was my grandmother. She was older. She had to work. I was often left in the care of my aunt, who struggled with schizophrenia. And I write about
Mhm.
that in the book too. So a
Yeah.
lot of it was just a practice that I made out of going to the library, coming home every Saturday with a stack of books, and just like literary escapism, right? Being that little girl who maybe didn't feel like I had much control over my home environment, over
Mhm.
things that children, struggle with, and not really having anyone to turn to. And I think books for me have always been a place to go when I didn't really have anyone to turn to, or when I was really struggling with severe anxiety as a child, right? Like, my books were my best friends. And I think that that's very foundational to my development.
Yes, and I can definitely relate to that as well. My mom and I were talking about the other day. My mother and father actually met outside of a library. So, I
Oh,
mean,
that's so romantic. That says so much. Look at you.
yes.
You're the light that you are. I mean, hello, mom and dad meeting outside the library. Like,
I mean,
how
yeah.
could you not
So,
be love?
so it's like it's destiny, and I can definitely understand that. But
Beautiful.
also, as you talk about in your book, you do mention a lot of the things that you went through, some of your experiences in life, and how at a certain point reading wasn't just necessarily for escapism necessarily, as it was for you to look for stories or find stories that you could see yourself in.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, she's known as the godmother of multicultural children's literature, and she has a really powerful quote that I actually have at the beginning of the book. I want to word it correctly because it's so
Sure.
powerful, and it informs the way that I think about the psychology, the healing psychology of reading. She says, books are sometimes windows offering views of worlds that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange. These windows are also sliding glass doors, and readers have only to walk through an imagination to become part of whatever world has been created or recreated by the author. When lighting conditions are just right, however, a window can also be a mirror. Literature transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we can see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. Reading then becomes a self affirmation, and readers often seek their mirrors in books. I love that.
Yeah, so do I. And it's funny because I will often say that every time I read something, no matter what it is, I seek to learn something from what I have read. But in
Yes.
thinking about bibliotherapy, it's also not only do I learn something, it's also another opportunity for me to expand my way of thinking and potentially grow and also heal.
Yes. Yeah, and I think those two are connected, right? Because how often do we get still enough to turn inward enough to consider our thought life, to really
Mhm.
look at our perspective, and to really ask ourselves, do I feel that way or think that? Or is that something
Mhm.
that I haven't quite interrogated or that I need to rethink? I think reading and really broadening your worldview and your perspective really offers us that like powerful opportunity for a perspective shift, or at least
Mhm.
for like a wider more nuanced perspective. You
Right.
know, there's so many different experiences. You don't have to have lived everyone's experience to be able to empathize and to be able to be curious about, you know, somebody else's journey. So I find that really effective in using stories and storytelling, whether that's through bibliotherapy, right? There's a lot of different ways you can integrate it. It doesn't just have to be reading books. You can read excerpts, essays, right? Prose, poetry. um, I often incorporate the use of like the written word with clients who are grieving. I recently had a client whose mother passed away and left her journals behind, and we've been
Wow.
reading excerpts from her mother's journal. And that's been really beautiful. This is my first
Mm.
time having that kind of therapeutic process with a client. Um, but she's discovering parts of her mother through reading her journals that she hadn't known. So, like, you know,
Wow.
even things that, you know, as girls, you wonder about your mom, like, what was her dating life like, you know, as a young woman? And so we're reading these journals and she's having these beautiful aha moments and connecting, you know, the dots between things that she saw or heard when she was a young girl. And it's just a beautiful way that she's connecting to her mother's memory. So just connecting with story and the written word in general, there's so many different entry points and access points to healing that make healing actually fun, because healing is
Yes,
not fun. It's
it's not.
hard work.
It is hard work, really going through that process. And I think the thing about bibliotherapy or doing it through books, in some ways, it can be easier because it's like you can look at what somebody else is going through or dealing with and then find ways in which you relate to it versus having to just come out and say, I am this, or I have done that, or I feel whatever. You can kind
Yeah,
of live vicariously through the characters in many
yeah.
cases.
And that's such an emotionally cathartic experience to have, because for the most part we're terrified of judgment, and we're always, you know, we live in a society that kind of reinforces shame and tells us that only certain stories are worthy or only certain things are acceptable. Only
Mhm,
certain stories deserve to be told or should be told, right? We learn how to keep secrets and
mhm.
feed into that shadow self, especially our collective shadow right now, right? Like we see what state the world is in. um,
Right.
so I think being able to experience our shadow parts, and the emotions that are difficult to move through and to witness without judgment is so important, because we're human beings. We have a full spectrum of
Right.
emotions, right? How do you alchemize rage? How do you alchemize
Mhm.
fear if you can't witness it, if you can't be curious enough about what's coming up for you in a compassionate, non-judgmental way? And I think when we're reading, you know, even if I write a lot about this too, like the ways that projection and
Mhm.
sublimation and different defense mechanisms play into an emotional journey that we go through with characters as we're reading fiction in particular. Um, and that's so cathartic because you have to feel a thing to release it. And so I think there's like that emotional journey that we go through when we connect with fictional characters, and it's just us in the book and there's nobody there on our shoulder judging us for our thoughts or like,
Yeah.
you know, wagging a finger, like. And so um, that's just super therapeutic in so many ways.
Yes, it is. It's really good. And again, it caused me to think, and it throughout the book, you're giving some exercises, you're mentioning different books, you're mentioning different clients, but I was just thrilled to see so many books that I love that you talk about in the book. So that was good for
Yes.
me. But for those who may not really know what bibliotherapy is, give us just a little bit about what it really is, and then tell us about Sadie Peterson Delaney, because she is such a powerful person
Absolutely.
in this field, powerful Black woman in this field.
Yes, I know that's right. Black woman, social worker, and librarian. Let's get into it.
Yes.
But I always tell people like the short form bibliotherapy is the use of literature to heal. So it's the use of selected literature, whether that be fiction, memoir, poetry, whatever's going to resonate emotionally with the client. We are selecting literature to help an emotional process happen that's therapeutic for the client. So that could be helping a client, with emotional healing, with grief and loss, with sometimes it's just life transitions, right? Like maybe you're moving to a new state, or you're having a baby, or there's so many different ways that literature can help provide an entry point into healing practice, self-reflection, and really trauma healing. And I talk a lot about this because as a clinician, people often ask me, well, aren't readers intellectualizing when they're reading? Don't therapists want their clients to be in their heart space and not their head space? But the thing is, for many of us, we need to be able to understand a thing logically before we can allow a feeling response to happen. And so I don't think that even if it was intellectualization, that's a bad thing, as long as it's helping someone move through their emotions. And I'm also asked in regards to trauma healing, like, well, reading a book isn't going to heal trauma. Of course not. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that bibliotherapy is one way, one entry point, one methodology, one modality, like other clinical modalities that exist, to help a person heal, to help a person, face life down with courage, come away with some meaningful insights, some meaningful connections between their life and the text, to integrate into their life, to change their behavior, to validate their experiences, to make them feel seen. And Sadie Peterson Delaney, God rest her soul, is so special to me because as a Boricua, Black Boricua bibliotherapist who've been training in this modality for some time, I had never heard her name until I was conducting research for the book. And I read a letter from Eleanor Roosevelt where she referred to the godmother of bibliotherapy. So I look up Sadie P. Delaney and I find out that this is a Black woman who was a social worker turned librarian, who was the head librarian at Tuskegee, who did such great work there, that she also worked at the Schomburg in New York City. And she's hailed as the godmother of bibliotherapy. I was like, what? How did I not know her? And so if y'all are interested, the Schomburg has the Dr. Sadie P. Delaney letters. I highly recommend that folks go check out her archive, because it was so beautiful to just read through letters. I mean, she was so loved in the community, not just the Black community, but I mean, her sorority sisters, her colleagues, even her daughter's letters to her are in those archives. She did tremendous work in the Black community, specifically using literature to help delinquent youth, the blind, and really played a key role in bibliotherapy programming in hospitals, in the Veterans Hospital. So I wish I could have contacted her estate. Nobody knows who's the point person for her estate, because there are like letters and pictures and things that I really wanted to include in my book. But of course, you need permission for that.
Right.
And so I couldn't find, who holds her estate. But if I ever could, that'd be my next project, because we need to know her name. We need to know the level, right, of her impact in this work. Because I think also here in America, when we think bibliotherapy, sometimes we think Great Britain, or we associate that with a particular, person. And so I'm just excited to introduce more people to her work and to her legacy.
Yes, and that's so important. When I shared the day on your book birthday, when I shared, I had a picture of her in a book that I had, because I just feel that, you are continuing in her legacy by sharing this work that you are doing and really making this something that we're all aware of. Because, I mean, just the whole thing of Black and brown people, therapy in and of itself is something that is new for many of us, and at least in more recent years, people have been more open about it. And then just thinking about the fact that traditionally, especially for Black Americans, we didn't even have the opportunity to read. So to think, not only are we taking these books and being able to learn and read and really dive into them, we're also using these books as not just for entertainment or whatever the case may be. We're using them
about liberation.
It's about liberation. So I just think that is really powerful.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because one of the things that I love positive feedback I've gotten on the book. What sets my book apart from maybe other texts on bibliotherapy is the social justice component of the book.
Right.
I really write about book banning and censorship being a mental health issue, a psychological issue. Of course, it's a political issue, but there's so many more ramifications, and what's
Mhm.
at stake when we silence and censor diverse stories. So that's such a huge part of why I wanted to write this book in this iteration. And I'm
Mhm.
really grateful that, I got to write the book that I wanted to write and say the things that I needed to say from the vantage point of being a Black Boricua therapist. I hope that it means more, younger therapists will consider the utility of the creative arts therapies. Because I think, people know about art therapy, dance therapy,
Right.
music therapy, but I don't think people realize that like these are serious modalities that people train in and are experts in and can weave these techniques into a truly healing psychological support process, in the therapy room. So that's my hope that this will open up, other portals um, so that folks can do this work and build off of it.
Yes. Thank you, Rosie Lee. We were
Thank
talking
you,
about you earlier.
Rosie.
So good to have you here. But it definitely is this book is needed because it opens the door to other ways of thinking about how we can use books and literature and learn from them. But not just that, also you talk about in the book, you talk about music or rap lyrics. Of course, you being from the Bronx, the birth of hip
Yes,
hop is from the Bronx, the
yeah.
boogie down Bronx. But just the fact that it could be rap lyrics, it could be spoken word, it could be oral stories, it can be poetry.
Yes.
There's so many different ways to have to do with words that I think that maybe for the person who isn't going to be reading whole books, there are other ways that they can still tap into this modality.
Absolutely. I just got this new client. He's a young brother. He's 23. And such a gifted orator.
Hmm.
And he writes lyrics, but I've been encouraging him to write poetry in our sessions. And so he's really wrestling with that. He's like, hip hop and poetry are not the same. I'm like, I'm not saying that they are. Well, we can
There's
argue, but so
similarities.
I got him one of those journals that's like one line a day. He's
Mm.
killing it. I mean, some of the poetic prose he's writing I'm like, okay, you got bars for real. Like you're a poet, And so it's this beautiful way that he's starting to see himself fully. I think he was feeling very like, oh yeah, well, I want to be an artist and I want to be a rap artist. But I have been helping him to see like you're a writer, you're a poet. It's the way that you articulate what you see and the way that you allow yourself to be impacted by the world, and poetically regurgitate what you are experiencing so that other people can feel that hope too. That's what makes you a poet. And
Hmm.
he's just like, oh my
Right.
God, yes, you're right. And so we're doing this one line a day, and he sends it to me every morning, and it's beautiful to see him growing as a writer. And that's really what it's about, right? Like bibliotherapy, expressive writing as bibliotherapy. It's finding the words and the language to articulate who you are, your experiences, to take your power back, to take the seat, as the protagonist of your life, the author of your life story. There's so many narratives that we inherit that
Hmm.
people try to thrust upon us, especially as Black women, right? Like what we can or cannot be, what we can and cannot do, or just the expectations. People's voices can get so loud. So I
Hmm.
love that the expressive arts therapies like bibliotherapy really return us back to self. Um, and it's beautiful. And I love to see what other people are doing with the reflections. There's a few therapist friends who've been using the text in their groups and with their individual clients. And it's just beautiful to get testimonies of like, oh, I tried this with this client and, it led to this discussion, or um, just aha moments that feel so connected. Because it's hard. It's hard to talk about, painful experiences that we've
Yeah.
had, and Nobody just comes into therapy. It's like, hi, let me tell you,
Yeah.
11 things that went wrong in my life, right?
Right,
So,
back when I was 2, this happened, and it's been
right,
following me my whole life, and this is why I am the way that I am today. Yeah, that's not happening.
right, right.
Wow. But just thinking about the fact, well, you've already mentioned this term, trauma informed. So,
Yeah,
as you are working with clients and looking for materials to share with them, I'm thinking more maybe specifically books right now. But how do you like determine what is quote unquote trauma informed to even know whether or not it would be a good resource for a client?
absolutely. So I really look for books, especially if we're talking about fiction, where the mental health issue of the character or whatever the challenges that the character is facing is not their entire personality.
Right.
I'm looking for three-dimensional characters that are human and that are real, but that are actually going through an emotional journey in the story that leaves the reader with something meaningful, whether that be the conflict gets resolved, the trauma gets integrated. We're learning that just because we endure trauma doesn't mean that life can't go on and still be beautiful. We're just learning how to integrate that pain, right, into something beautiful so that we can continue to evolve and live. And that's really the goal of a human, right, life cycle story, is to get to the end of your life and to know, like, dang, I took some hits, but look at the beautiful life that I lived. Look at the blessing of the life that I was able to curate for myself,
Mhm.
and so how do I go on after losing someone that I love dearly? How do I bounce back after um man, like life events, right, that I had no control over? Even we're seeing now what's going on with the genocide in Gaza. There's so much happening.
Mhm.
And of course, reading isn't going to solve those things, but what
Right.
it will do is activate us to step into our power. And so when I think about trauma informed stories, it's telling the truth about life events that happened to us and the way those things affected us, but it leaves the reader with some hope, with some hopeful possibility.
Mhm.
That's my criteria anyway as a bibliotherapist. And so I always read any text that I'm going to recommend to a client before I prescribe it, whether that's a poem,
Mhm.
whether that's a book, whether that's an excerpt from a book, because I want to make sure that I'm matching the emotional tempo of the client, what they're coming to me with, what they're working on, with the story that the literature is telling, or the
Okay.
message that's being sent through the story. So that's pretty much how I do it.
And I see your question, Regina. I will get to it here in just a second. But I've known you for a while, so I know your head is always in a book. But
Always.
but it's like in you saying that, it's not like you automatically prescribe the same books to people all the time. There may be some overlap, depending on what you're working on. But how do you like keep up with so many different books to really be able to know what to share or prescribe to a client, because you would have to read a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, I read a lot. I read a lot. So I actually recently have started cataloging
Okay.
things digitally because I used to keep everything in a spreadsheet. So like I have my book RX for depression, my book RX for anxiety. I have like different themes that I pull from for different ailments or emotional problems. I
Mm-hmm.
recently discovered Library Thing. It's a really dope app that I downloaded, and instead of having to enter everything on an Excel spreadsheet, it holds everything. It's kind of like a mini library catalog, and I
Love
just catalog what I'm reading in there. And especially because I read so many advanced readers copies, if I'm reading something new and it hasn't come out yet, and I want to know, like, oh yeah, I need this book for my bibliotherapist bookshelf, then I'm going to make note of that because I'm going to want to buy that book for my bibliotherapy shelf. But yeah, that's really what it is. I'm always reading, like, genuinely. I don't watch TV. I don't have a social life. I have two small children.
it.
So like that's what I be doing, y'all. I be taking care of my babies and reading,
And
um,
reading.
and
Wow.
building my therapy practice. My toolkit. But I
Yes, and
do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's just really amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. I definitely want to work on having more of a social life as my kids get older. But for now, it works out because I really love what I do. And that's how I built my platform, was amplifying the work of, Black and BIPOC um, authors. And so much of this work was behind the scenes. And I think what really prompted me to start showing my work and sharing publicly with public facing education was when my son was diagnosed with autism. I was like, okay, I gotta really step it up. I'm a small business owner, Black woman. This is an endeavor that's really never been done before by anyone that I know. So I have to start showing up and showing my face and talking about what I do as a bibliotherapist. And that was really a journey, but I'm so glad because I connected with you. It's been like 3 years now since we've known each other. Um, and it got me the book deal. That visibility got me the book deal. So I think someone asked today, how do I what advice do I give to Black writers or anyone who is a creative who wants a book deal? And it's like, look, we have to work harder and we have to be so excellent at what we do. But many of us, before we got the book deal, we've already written the book or we're already living the book. So that's the main thing that I say is just be true to you, work hard, do your work, whatever that purpose is that spirit has given you, operate in those gifts. And then when the time comes, you'll be ready, to talk effortlessly about it. It won't be a performance. It'll just be you being you and sharing yourself and sharing your community and what you do for community. And I think people respond to that authentically.
Absolutely. And because we've known each other for 3 years and I've kind of been through part of this process with you, it's so true. The person I'm talking to today is no different from the person that I talked to 3 years ago. But, you've been continuing to do the work, showing up, sharing the books. And one thing that really makes your work even more powerful for me is the fact that you are centering the BIPOC community. You are looking at books and things that serve us, because for many of us growing up, I can speak for myself and probably maybe even for you to a certain extent, there weren't necessarily a whole lot of things that we could turn to that really were telling our stories. And we hear this a lot, representation matters, and it really does, because a young girl going through puberty that is, blonde hair and blue eyes is going to have a different experience of going through puberty that I would have. So being able to, there's some similarities, but then there are differences. So I think that is really important. And based upon the communities that you work with in schools and outside of schools, you're able to help people in ways that they can really, really see themselves in the stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. That's just really important for us. Now, Regina, I didn't forget about your question. You were asking, what book was I reading that mentioned Ms. Delaney? It is a book that is largely out of print. It's actually a set, it's like Black American Women in History or something like that. I'll have to look up the title and I'll drop it in the notes later. But it was like 3 thick volumes, probably about that. Each one is about that big, and they came out in like 1999.
But I screenshotted them as soon as you sent it to me.
Right.
Are out of print, so I'm hoping they pop up somewhere. I know eBay sometimes has.
Right, exactly.
Books, but they're beautiful books.
Yes, it's like 3 thick ones, and that's how I knew about Ms. Delaney from before, and a whole bunch of other Black women that have done great things throughout history, because they were encapsulated in these 3 huge volumes. So that's how I first heard the name. But just thinking about, and you touched on it a little bit, this climate that we're in right now, where so many books are being banned, so many ways people are trying to diminish our stories. I mean, even in terms of television, you're starting to see less shows that feature us and tell our stories and things like that. So how important is it for us to really lean into some of those books and things that are being taken away from us and to keep those stories going?
It's absolutely important, because in a minute they probably gonna stop printing our books, right? Like, we're seeing how our history and our historical memory is under attack. I mean, it blew my mind. I teach bibliotherapy at Queens College, and so when President Trump unjustly dismissed Dr. Hayden from her post as Librarian of Congress. I mean, what was it, like a 2-sentence email, if that, telling her that, you know, she was pretty much fired. Um, I like literally revamped my entire syllabus for that class that week because I was like, no, I'm
Mm,
going to dedicate this entire class to you understanding who Dr. Hayden is, why, how she got her post as the first woman and first African American as Librarian of Congress, and the impact of her legacy as a Black librarian. And I'm so glad I did that because it was like one little thing that I felt I had control over, at least with my class, where I could leave them this historical memory, so that it's not just, oh, did you hear like Trump fired another person unjustly? Like, no, this
mm,
is bigger than just Trump fired another executive unjustly. Like, this is Dr. Hayden, who literally kept libraries open after Freddie Gray was murdered in Baltimore so that kids could have a safe place to go when schools were closed.
mhm,
Like, she
mhm.
has set the bar for Black librarianship so high. And for her to have been in that post for our community is something that is so crucial, that everybody know her name and the impact of her role, right? Like, and so I feel like that's what I've been telling everybody is like, look, build your bookshelf, right? Like, build your bookshelf. You may not hear of new releases for Black authors, but do your research, right? Join Black book communities, BIPOC book communities, amplify Black authors, connect with other Black readers, right? Like, a lot of the books that I end up using in bibliotherapy, I learned from other colleagues. You know,
Yeah.
your page, my homie Shelby Monet of Shelby in the Book Club. Like, there's some phenomenal Black readers out there who make it their mission, you know, to make content every day, just promoting the works of our writers who tell our stories. And so support them, you know, but definitely buy the books, read the books, talk about the books. Somebody asked me the other day, there's so many book clubs. Like, why should I think if I do a therapist book club, it's going to make a difference? I said, girl, because somebody out there wants to be part of your book club, not mine.
Exactly.
Go start the
Exactly.
book club. You know what I mean? Like, don't ever feel like, dang, you know, nobody's gonna join. Or no, you want to create a Bookstagram page, do it. Like, I had like 300 followers for the first year. My page got zero traction for the first year. But it's the consistency, it's the showing up. That's how you build community too, because that's how you show people who you are, what you're about, what you do. And then naturally people will gravitate towards that, who are on the same vibration, and you build community that way. And that's how we protect our history. That's how we share stories. That's how we write our books, right? Like,
Yes.
this is possible because of my community, because of you, because of other folks in the community who valued my work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, word of mouth travels faster in our community than any
Absolutely.
feature, magazine, news article, right? Like, people work with you, they have a good experience. It's like, oh, you should talk to so and so who does bibliotherapy. Um, so we have to be so real about the dangers that lie ahead, that are currently, you know, unfolding, and get really, really serious about leaning into reading our work, supporting our Black writers, writing our books.
Yes, writing our books and formulating these communities, because you know you hit the nail on the head. I was telling somebody, recently I moved to Atlanta 4 years ago, and when I moved there, I knew I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to reconnect with my sorority, Sigma Gamma Rho. Yes, I got to shout them out. I knew I
Hey,
wanted to do that. I knew that I wanted to find a church home. I knew I wanted to volunteer and do certain things. But what I wasn't expecting, living in Atlanta, is the book community. Because I had been already doing this, I started this like maybe about 9 months or so before I moved to Atlanta. But Atlanta has a lot of Black women writers, which is who I feature. And you've been to Atlanta, so that I got a chance to meet you. It's pretty much anybody on a book tour is going to come through Atlanta. But
yes,
it was just something that I did not realize, that community that I was going to get, all from a love of books. And it starts there and it expands so many other places. Like Rosie Lee, who's in the room, she's an author and we've done things together. We hang out, we're friends in real life, all those sorts of things. But it's just beautiful to me to have that community, because
yeah,
it's the like mind, it's the like spirit, kind of like you said earlier. It's people who are on a quest to learn more, to be the best that they can be, and all of that comes just from reading books, which really is oftentimes a pretty solitary type of thing, but it's
Yeah,
something about these communities and these book clubs and, these live streams and things like that that help make it be something that we can all enjoy and participate in together.
absolutely. That's what it's about. And honestly, reading together is better. Even if it's just like we read separately, but we talk about the book, like I'm
Right.
all for that. Slide in my DMs, send me the screenshots. Like I love that. We get a chance. That's really what bibliotherapy is about too, because I get asked a lot, what's the difference between like reading as therapeutic and then therapeutic reading with your therapist? And the difference is the discussion, right? A therapist is uniquely skilled and trained to make the unconscious conscious, to bring things into your conscious awareness, and then to help you manifest change. And to alchemize, right, shadow parts and integrate those parts into the self. So we talk about the discussions that happen in book clubs and conversations like the one we're having right now. That's what's therapeutic about it. It's that we're not just at home alone all day, reading. Yes, that's therapeutic in our individual self-care practice. And books as a psychosocial support in our individual lives is really important. But the therapeutic piece that makes reading bibliotherapy is the discussion. It's the relationship orient
Mm-hmm.
of what happens when you cultivate community through a love of literature, right? When you go to the library, and you build a relationship with your librarian, or you have somewhere to go when it's hot and you need air conditioning, or it's cold and you need heat, right? Like it's the communal aspect that's part of our collective well-being. And I write a lot about that in the book too, is like all the ways that we form relationships with one another through books, and what that means to our mental health is so key.
Mm-hmm. And also what it means for communities that may not be as privileged. Back to the whole concept of the libraries. And you definitely lean into that, how libraries are so much more.
Yeah, that was huge for me as a library kid, because I was that kid. I didn't have anywhere to go after school. So like, and also after my grandmother passed, I was 14 when she died. I went to foster care, and then I emancipated myself at 16. So like, if I wasn't going to school or working, I was literally at the library. And when I was younger and more vulnerable and naive, after school, my high school librarian would just let me kick it with her. I would just kick it with her after school. You know what I'm saying? Do my work, help her reshelf books, be nosy, talking grown woman talk, at 14, 15, thinking I'm grown. But the library has such a special place in my heart, not just because I was a library kid, but also because it was just always a safe place for me to go and be. And I've always been lucky enough to form really great friendships with my librarians, no matter where I lived, what foster home I was in. Like, it was always like, okay, where's the library? And so that's another piece to this story that we're telling tonight, right? That our libraries are also under attack. Um, and we just have to like read the signs. I'm
Mm-hmm.
hopeful. I try not to get too much into like doomsday mentality, even though that can happen too. But I do know, because of the work that you do and I do, and folks in our community, that if for whatever reason our libraries were defunded on a grand scale, people would be coming out the woodworks, building free little libraries, doing bookshops. It's happening now. So I believe in us and the power of the people to always make literacy as liberation, the movement. But I'm really scared for our future when it comes to our libraries as pillars, as mental health pillars in our communities.
Mm-hmm. That is something. And you mentioned like the little free libraries. That's, well, a
Yeah,
dream of mine, to like set up some little free libraries in different places and put, the books that I want to see in those areas, that speak to the people that are in those areas and things like that, because it is important. And the reality of it is, yes, the library is great, but if you find that book that you just really, really love, ultimately you got to take it back. So the
right.
advantage of the little free libraries is, at least, people can kind of hold on to them if they choose to,
Yeah.
and maybe put something else in there. But
Yeah,
that, I
I
just think,
love
important.
I love putting my advanced readers copies in the free little libraries because people are usually not expecting that, and just like
Right.
hearing the joy that people get of like, oh my god, like this book comes out in August, I wanted to read this book. So that's like usually what I do with my advanced readers copies. If I don't give it to a client, I'll usually put it in a free little library and just pass on the love.
I love that. That's so important. So Rosie Lee, we've been talking about that. So that's something we can do. Is I get a bunch of them, y'all. I'm not in my normal spot, as you would see all the books behind me normally, but yes, I have so many, and I definitely want to start sharing them out in that way. Now, of course, we are a group of adults, so we're talking about bibliotherapy from the um, some perspective of how it supports us. But I do love that you work with children, all the way up to, in the book you were talking about someone who's 64, and she might not even be your oldest client, or I should say most seasoned client.
Miss E.
Yes, but I love the fact that bibliotherapy or learning or developing through literature is something that can happen at a very young age.
Absolutely. That's where it starts, right? Like our English teachers were our first bibliotherapists. I write about my first grade teacher. Back in the day, we was collecting like cereal tops and stuff to have our reading pizza parties on Fridays. Like, she made reading fun. This was before No Child Left Behind, so we had reading choice as kids, and reading wasn't like this regimented, standardized, constantly getting weekly assessments kind of thing in school. Reading was just fun. I love that most seasons. And so, yeah, I think it really starts early, because just like a love of literature gets cultivated early in the home, even before preschool, literacy trauma also develops early. So those early experiences that we have with reading can really make or break our experience, or how we view ourselves as readers. So that's why another lens I took in the book, if you notice, like I'll say a lot of cultivating a love of literature. I'm speaking to the reader always, but the assumption is never that you're an avid reader who's just devouring books. The assumption is always that books are healing, and, consider this and consider how to integrate this practice into your life in a way that makes sense for you. Because I think for a lot of people, returning to literature is a step-by-step process, because they had that trauma early on, or they felt like they weren't strong readers, or maybe they didn't perform well at school, right? And so really being able to help people reclaim a love of reading. Like, I don't care what you read as long as you're reading. We have a literacy crisis in our country. Like, as long as you can read and comprehend, baby, read what you enjoy. Absolutely,
Right. And that is something, thinking about literacy trauma. And in my head, I was thinking about maybe the person who, as you said, struggles with reading. Or, I can remember years ago being a literacy volunteer and meeting someone who was seasoned. She was in her 60s, and she had to learn how to read because her husband rather had passed away, and he was doing everything. And then once he passed away, she had to learn how to read and just so she could function in life. So from that perspective, that's a whole nother type of thing that, once you get into or able to, this opens up a whole nother world.
Absolutely. Wow, that's a powerful story you just shared. I wonder what that journey was like for her at 60 to find your identity as a reader. I'm so glad that she had that opportunity.
Yes, because there's things that we take for granted. We're talking about bibliotherapy and diving in and understanding and things like that, but also thinking about the fact, that there may be people who don't, read or can't. So, she had to learn how to write checks, all that kind of stuff, because she just did not know. So, but things like this and programs like this can help people, because, as you say, it's not necessarily always about necessarily reading a full 500-page novel. It could be identifying with a song lyric that you don't necessarily have to read. You just heard the song.
Yep, right out the lyrics, because we playing that thing on repeat anyway. When a song is hitting and it's
Right.
hitting the emotional chord, you could replay that thing a few times. So write out the lyrics, see what's
Right.
speaking to you, what imagery,
Mhm.
what symbols,
Mhm.
are really speaking to you. We're human beings, so we also, our internal world is built of symbol and archetype. And so we talk about bibliotherapy, but also the context is very Jungian in that way. Carl Jung wrote a lot about the collective shadow, but also the collective archetypes that we've internalized. And so I like to work a lot with symbol and archetype as well. But
Mhm.
sometimes just the level of specificity in a poem or a written lyric can get us to think more, um, with more curiosity and more emotional engagement around symbol, archetype, and meaning, right? Like
Mhm.
sometimes it's not until we look very specifically at a line in a poem or why a writer chose to detail something a certain way that there's like an aha moment, like, oh wow, I didn't realize that in this poem there's a lot of sunflowers.
Mhm.
Sunflowers were, my husband's favorite flower, and right, we're grieving your husband. And so
Mhm.
even making like those connections are really special as well.
Now, by archetypes, there might be some people who don't know what that means.
Yeah, so archetype is essentially a symbol or mental representation. And so we all grow up internalizing different symbols as archetypes. So for example, the maiden or the witch, right? So if you
Mhm.
bring it down to an allegorical level in fairy tale, there's like the good and the bad, right? So one simple way to think about archetype and symbol is the symbol and the archetype of maiden, witch, or crone, right?
Mhm.
And so when you look at fairy tales, typically you have like the innocent young woman, Snow White. She's just living her best life, wants to fall in love. She finds the apple. She's naive, so she bites it, right? But the minute that she meets the witch and she realizes, oh, this witch poisoned me, right? She's coming into her awareness now, and she's no longer this naive little girl. Now she's becoming a woman. So she's having to encounter things that a woman would encounter, and the reality of what life really is, the real world. She's no longer living under that veil of girlhood and innocence. So that's kind of like one way that a therapist would really tease out what archetypes speak to you. I had a student this semester who she was terrified of Ursula the Witch. And so she had
Mm.
shared this in our class one day, and I had brought to her attention, I'm like, do you realize as a library worker, all of the book recommendations you bring to class are about the sea? And she had never made that connection. She was
Mm.
like, "Oh, wow." So I'm like, it's interesting to me that like as an archetypal figure, the witch, Ursula, the sea witch, terrified you as a little girl, but yet all of the things that bring you joy or the novels anyway that you share in class take place
Mm.
in the sea. So she was like, I'm gonna have to bring that to my therapist. I was like, yeah, you do. You do. And that would be a rich process for you to discover what that's about. But we are storytelling, story thinking beings. We make meaning out of the symbols and the mental representations that we do or do not have. And so thinking about things from a symbolic perspective, or even thinking about archetype at all, because many of us, like you said, don't know what that means or don't think about things in those terms. But we all have internalized ideas about
Mhm.
symbol and archetypes. Like when you're little, they tell you anything black is bad, anything white is good.
Mm.
That's
Mhm.
purposeful in its arrangement. That's not true, right?
Right.
But like, why does that function well under a collective shadow in American society? So like it's very interesting because even my daughter just turned 5 and she said that to me yesterday. She said, "Mom, black is bad, white is good. We're reading kind of
Mhm.
fairy tale." I said, "That is not true. Black is beautiful." And then I had to stop myself because I was about to go on a whole
Go in. Like, wait a minute.
But then I remembered, I'm like, she's 5. She's talking about things from what she's observing, in the
Right.
cartoons that she watches and the fairy tales that we read. That is how things get framed, right? Like black represents the shadow, right? Light is the light. And so that's all conditioning that we have
Mhm.
since we're young. Social conditioning, it's our social cognitive um, way that we perceive things. And so engaging on this level with texts gets us curious about why and what meaning we make out of
Mm.
it. And that's largely unconscious until you work with a therapist who makes it conscious, and you can learn some really cool things about yourself and the way your mind works when you play with your relationship to language, semantics, symbol, and all the things.
That's good stuff. Because yeah, just think about all the internalized messages that we get, and it
Yeah,
can be societal things, things that we're reading, the stories that we're hearing. So I'm thinking, like you mentioned, Snow White, and I'm thinking growing up watching Cinderella or whatever it is. And then we finally got Princess Tiana, and she was a frog for most of the
right.
movie. So
You know,
it's like, what's that all about? So
don't even get me started. Okay.
But I mean, but those are things, and it makes a whole lot of sense how the stories that we're hearing, whether they're through a film, which initially was written, that just ends up on film, or a book or a song or whatever it is. So yeah, all of that's just really deep because it starts with the words.
Absolutely.
It all starts with the
Absolutely.
word. Yes, I haven't. Yes, would love to be able to sort through internalized messages and chuck out of here. Yes, yes,
Too. Me too,
yes.
Mark.
Yes, there's just so many, so many. Now we are almost at time, believe it or not. So,
Oh
but
wow.
before we go, I do want to just mention a few books that you mentioned in your book, books that like really resonated with you and have resonated with me as well. One is "I Know Why the Caged Bird
Mm,
Sings" by Maya Angelou.
I love that book so. That's probably the only book that I've read more than 6 times.
Oh wow,
Yeah, I love
wow.
the book so much.
And what is it from, like, just a therapeutic viewpoint do you get from that story? I mean, besides just the great language of Maya Angelou.
Yeah, I think so much of it is owning your mind, right? We see Maya from a young girl having no control over her chaotic environment and trying to um, survive it. And also making some really important observations about her family, her community, her station in life, right? Because of the way Black people um, are treated, because the way she's treated, even as a young girl, treated like an adult with such hostility. And she's just like, so I think it's really a book that teaches us to be a friend of our own mind, to honor our own experiences, not to let society gaslight us, but to be brave. And even if you feel like a caged bird, your mind is free. You can liberate
Mm,
yourself anytime that you speak your truth, sing your song, write your story, tell your story. Um, that book means so much to me. There were so many dark days in my life,
mm,
and that is a book that I literally, like, I remember senior year of high school, I carried that book in my guitar case. I used to play the autistic guitar,
wow. Okay.
um, acoustic guitar, sorry. And that book lived in my guitar case. I had like a little scattered copy of it, but yeah, I love that book so much.
That's something. 6 times. Wow. That's a lot of times. So it definitely resonates with you. And even in you saying that, understanding that just because you've read a book before doesn't mean you can't read it again, because when you read it, second, third, fifth, sixth, 20th time, it's you're reading at a different space in your journey. So it can say
Yes,
something different depending on where you are at the time that you're reading it.
yes. For me, it's always a portal back to my inner child, my inner teen. And I love that about rereading books. We get to go deeper, not just like
Mhm.
wider, you know?
Another one that you mentioned, for colored girls. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
say the whole name because it's law, but for colored girls, we know what that is. By
yeah,
Ntozake Shange, which is a choreo
yeah.
poem, which harkens back to you talking about poetry being a device that you often share in your therapy.
Yeah, I love that collection so much. I remember when it first came out, I think I was graduating high school, or no, either high school or college. I can't remember, but it
The
was
movie,
life changing to read. Yeah, the movie, that's right.
right?
Um, because the movie it brought the book to life. That's probably the only movie that I enjoyed as much as the book.
Okay.
But seeing Black women's stories and seeing them sing and dance through the trauma
Mhm.
just hit for me on so many different levels. And it's a classic book that everybody should read at least once.
At least once. And when you were talking about, in my mind, I was thinking about, I don't know, some of you may have seen the episode of A Different World where Kim ultimately it does one of Nikki Giovanni's poems, and you do mention Nikki, can't not mention Nikki Giovanni, but
Yes, rest in
earlier
peace.
on, Freddie's character's like, and somebody, anybody, sing a black girl song.
Yes.
And ironically, I was getting my nails done last week, and I pulled it up, and we were watching that particular episode, so it really made me think about how powerful, into Jackie Shange's poem was and
Mhm.
still is, and also the works of a Nikki Giovanni.
Yes. Talk about singing a black girl song, right? Like Nikki taught us. She taught us to own our stories without shame, with pride, how to really use our voices. Man, may she rest in peace.
May she rest in peace. Both of them actually, into Zaki.
Yes.
And favorite quote: "Don't worry, cause you ain't pretty. I'd rather you have a good mind than a cute behind." Okay,
I love that.
love
That's
that.
Nikki Giovanni.
Yeah, I'm not Karen. Who is that? Let us know. Clarify for us. But yes, that's a good one.
That's a
That
good
is a
one.
good one. That is a good one. Okay. She says from Cage Bird. Okay, okay, yes. Oh, from Cage. Oh, yeah, from Cage Bird.
The
All right.
book?
From the
Okay.
book. Okay, got it. You also mentioned something that's a little more recent. You talk about Brown Girl Dreaming, which is about 10 years old now by Jacqueline Woodson, which is also poetic poetry and geared
Yes.
towards a younger audience, but powerful for everyone.
Absolutely. I love that novel in verse. That's probably one of the first novel in verses that I ever read. And I've read that
Mm-hmm.
one a few times as well, because that's a go-to for me in bibliotherapy.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's good stuff. And let me see, what else did I want to mention? The eyes were watching God.
Mm, yes. I can never get enough of it. Janie, oh Janie. Janie taught us a lot about Black womanhood, didn't she?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that one, I have a mentee who just graduated from high school, and she was talking to me. She's like, the eyes watching God, what Janie was talking about, will love come or whatever, whatever the quote is. And I'm like, girl, you 17, it's coming, it's coming. Let's get you graduated first. It's gonna come. Don't worry about it, right?
I feel like we all read that book around that age and just, it's like when we was listening to old school R&B thinking that we knew something about heartbreak and the blues. But I love that for her. Personally, hey, if there's anything that's gonna hold up a mirror to Black womanhood and falling in love and the different ways that love could either build you up or break you down, I think Janie's story is chef's kiss for that. So
Yes,
may it enlighten her, may it provide her with some meaningful connections, some insights into what's going on in these streets, because
right. Yes,
it's
ma'am.
hard out here in the dating
Hard out here.
field. So maybe
Absolutely.
it'll be some good food for conversation with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just one more. The Color Purple, which many of you, if you watch here regularly, know that was like the first book that I really dove into that was written by a Black woman writer.
Yes, classic. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
I said that for Color Girls was one of my preferred movies, but for The Color Purple, Chef's Kiss, I love that film so much.
Mm-hmm. Both of them.
Well, the second one, not so much. How did you feel about the musical?
I liked it because it told the story in a different way. So I did
Yeah.
enjoy it. I did enjoy it.
I wasn't expecting it to be like a musical for some reason. I mean,
No,
obviously it's marketed as a musical, but maybe I just wasn't watching enough trailers for it. So that I think that kind of threw me off. But I love the way that Sophia's story got fleshed out. And
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
you know what? I
mm-hmm.
did enjoy it. Let me stop lying. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed both of them. The
Right.
first one and the second, though, for sure.
Right, because I feel like if you have read the book, which that's one that I've read many times, you see things in the second one that you didn't really necessarily pick up
Yes,
on in the first. So, but that also just speaks to the power of stories and our longevity, and also the lens at which someone may be looking at the story through. Because the story
yeah,
that I read and the story that you read might not look exactly the same, even though it's the
that's
same
right.
words on the page.
Yeah. What did Ta-Nehisi Coates say in his new book, The Message? He said each reader comes to the text differently from our own lived experiences. And I love that so much because First of all, that book is just phenomenal. More people should read it and talk about it. But I love the way he writes about our sensibilities as readers and how we come to text based on our different perspectives and experiences. That's
Mm-hmm.
so true. Because before I was a mother, I just didn't have the lens. And my husband likes to joke on me because he's like, when you were a young social worker, your feelings would be hurt. Like, people keep asking me, do I have kids? But I've been working with kids. I don't need to have them. He's like, and now look at you. Now you're a mom, and you got to deal with your kids teachers. And you're like, do you have kids? Do you know what it's like to be operating under 3 hours of sleep, constant stress?
Mm-hmm.
You're right, because it's changed me a lot. And my lens is very different. It's even with, more tender stories around motherhood or child loss, like some things I just can't read, that I used to be
Mm-hmm.
able to read. Um, and also like the state of the world and seeing children being harmed in such a violent way who are innocent. Like stories about children right now are very tender for me.
Yes.
But it
Yes.
goes to your point that, wherever we are in our life path influences how we come to texts.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. That is so good. And we don't have to talk about this book necessarily, but I told you before we came on, my therapist just suggested that I reread The Alchemist because there are some things I've been creating and building. And so she's like, go back and read that.
I love that for you because you're someone who operates so strongly in your purpose. And so the idea of going back to The Alchemist, which is all about, the hero's journey, it's all about that question, right? Like, what is my purpose? How does that shift and expand over time? Um, because you're such a creative. So I love that your therapist knows that about you enough to recommend that you return to it and kind of like, see what comes up in this season.
Right. So she's doing bibliotherapy as
Yes,
well.
she is. Yeah, that's prescriptive. So you can prescribe a text, which is
Mm-hmm.
prescriptive bibliotherapy, or you could do interactive bibliotherapy. So if there's a passage that resonates with you, you can actually bring it to her in your therapy session to process it together. Or maybe have her engage you in a discussion around a part of the book or engage in some writing in response to the book. There's a lot of fun ways you can make it interactive bibliotherapy during your sessions as well.
Yes. So I'm going to share your book with her.
Please
Tell
do.
her I talked to the expert. Not that you're not lady, but
Yay.
I talked to the expert,
I
and
love
it
that.
is in this book as well, and I love that. So, Karen is saying I read The Color Purple again as an adult and took something different from it than I did when I read it as a teenager. Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely, absolutely. That is so powerful. So, Miss Emily, my friend, again, we are a little over time, but I knew that would probably happen.
My
just
bad.
because, just because, no, it's fine. It's fine because I love you. I love talking
I
to you.
love
I
you
love the work
too.
that you are
Thank you.
doing in the world and all of that. So, of course, your book baby turns 1 month tomorrow, and you've been out, man, you've had so many articles and interviews and all this stuff. You are doing the thing and putting it
Thank
out in
you.
the world. So, are there any spaces or places that people can look for, besides buying the book? We want them to do that, but just to learn more about what you've got going on or come get a book signed or whatever the case may be, are there places that you want to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be at the Bronx's Reading Book Festival on Saturday, June 21st. That event is free and open to the public. Please come check me out in the Bronx. I can't wait to go back home for
Yes.
that. I'll also be at Possible Futures Bookstore in Bridgeport, Connecticut on June 7th. Those tickets should be up on their website. And there's a few pending stops for this summer, fingers crossed that I'll be able to get to. It's always dependent on childcare, Marcy, so
Okay, right, right.
I gotta secure those details first. But for sure, at Possible Futures on June 7th and the Bronx is Reading Book Fest on June 21st. And then subscribe to my website. I have a monthly newsletter where I spotlight Black and BIPOC literature. I'll put any updates there in terms of like appearances that I have coming up or updates on the book. Book me to speak, come to your school, come to your classroom. That's my most favorite thing to do, is to teach. I do have some courses available for purchase on my website for bibliotherapists who want to learn more. about this modality. And yeah, just buying the book, reviewing the book, sharing the book. It all helps a debut Black author. So I really appreciate y'all for joining us tonight and for your excitement for the book. I hope you'll read it.
Yes. And I do have to say, you did not mention it specifically, but I know because it was one of the first things that I did with you is you can actually, do it. There's an intake where you can get a book prescription.
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah, so
make
you
sure
can book me virtually for a session or for a book prescription, and that's where I'll do a reading intake to get to know you as a reader, what you're dealing with, and this current season of life, what you're looking for a book prescription for, and then I'll give you a prescription of 3 texts with some prompts to really deepen your reading practice around those particular issues that you're currently managing. Some people just want the book prescription, and some people like to have the virtual 50-minute session, and all the links to book those are also on my website. And thank you, Marcy, for putting. I see you with the Instagram and Threads hands on the website. I love that.
Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I want to make sure that people know how to stay in touch with you because, your book is beautiful. It's a wonderful piece of work to be added to the canon for sure. But, there are so many things that you do. And I want to make sure people are aware of all of those things that you're doing and how they can work with you and stay connected. So please, at the bottom, it's been scrolling all of Emely's places where you can reach her. And please do so. Reach out, buy the book, share the book, have conversations about the book. Give good reviews for the book. All of those things matter. So
Listen, even if it's not a good review, just review it because it all helps. I heard if you hit 100 reviews on Amazon, the algorithm boosts your book. I don't know if that's true, but you know how the algorithm be. So it's probably some truth to it. So review the book, even if it's something you did not buy on Amazon, you can still review on Amazon, Goodreads, all the things. Anything helps.
And see, this is the problem when you talk to somebody you're like, oh, one more thing. It is available in audio as well.
It is. Yeah. Wesley Shaban narrated the audiobook. She did a phenomenal job. And I'm so grateful to her. She knocked it out the park.
Yes. So you have options. So Emely, I'm gonna let you grab some water. I'm just gonna say good night to everybody right quick. So I will see you in a second. Don't hang up just yet. All righty. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Oops. Yes. All right. So that was so exciting to have my friend Emely here for this great conversation. Again, please grab your copy of Bibliotherapy in the Bronx. Recommend it to your libraries, listen to the audio, all those different things, because this is important work and it really will help us to think about the ways that we read a little bit differently. So normally I would share what's coming up next week, but because I am not in my normal spot, I don't have that stuff in front of me. So just look for within the next day or so information for our upcoming guests for next week and beyond. This summer is going to be full of great guests and even some surprises along the way as I get out and enjoy some of those wonderful book conferences that are coming up over the summer. So it's been a pleasure to have you here again. Thanks again for sharing with us and for listening to this great conversation. And don't forget to tell a friend or two. And most importantly, please continue to live well. Take good care. See you soon. Bye-bye.